Hello and welcome to the Express on Purpose podcast. Today I am joined by Dr. Laurie Broker and Dr. Jay Lepp. Lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Fabulous to be here. Thank you, Rich.
I'm really excited about this episode, because the essence of this show is this exploration of full authentic expression and what it means to live a rich life and to be yourself. And when I first came across Dr. Laurie's work and then now Dr. Jay's work, I was really intrigued because it took some of my breathwork and nervous system understanding into a whole different direction. And what I'd love to start the show with is just for each of you to give a little bit of a flavor about what it is you do and how you initially got into that work. And I know that's a big question, but just to give a little flavor there, and then we'll start to dive in some of the bigger topics. So, ladies first.
Thanks again, Rich. It's interesting. Both Jay and I are chiropractors, and I feel super blessed that in the world of chiropractic, we get to explore different avenues and different styles of being, techniques and philosophies of chiropractic itself. So I was thinking about this morning. I think it was about 18 years ago. I traveled to Toronto, and part of that trip to Toronto is because I come from a family of chiropractors. I have 3 brothers, and 2 of which are chiropractors. And I have a handful of sister-in-laws and nieces and nephews that are also chiropractors. So as we get together as a family, it's always a write-off because we have all this chiropractic wisdom. So back to Toronto, I was going out to visit one of my brothers, and I needed a write-off. So he said, well, let's go do a seminar. And we chose to go to do a network seminar. And that's about as much as I knew about network at that time. Mm-hmm. He knew a little bit more than I did, but it was a write-off and it was a reason for us to go and hang out. And so we went to some stinky hotel room in the Toronto airport to spend a weekend in a seminar room and just really to hang out together. Mm-hmm. And it turned out to be this particular technique that Jay and I have then spent the last 20 plus years in my life, and certainly more than that in his life, learning and exploring. But it was really interesting because when I went to that seminar, we sat and the instructor, who was a very beautiful and gracious man, said, has anybody had a network entrainment? In network, we use the word entrainment, but instead of adjustment. And network's a little different because we're really working with the energetics and the structure of the body. So it's not your classic chiropractic session where you may hear any clicks or pops or anything that way as well. And so I shot my hand up because it was one of the first times I would have experienced this. And I went up and I sat at the front of the room in front of all the people that were registered for the seminar. And he put his hand on my back and he said, I look at you and the way that you're carrying your body, and I can see that you've had, quite a significant stress. And I said, no, I didn't. And he goes, maybe, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, there was something that happened that really changed the trajectory of your life. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Nothing happened. I'm fine. And he was so kind, but he was very clear that there was something the way that I was presenting, the way that I was carrying my body really revealed that there was something traumatic or some stress that I perhaps hadn't totally dealt with. And I was adamant that I was absolutely fine and there was absolutely nothing wrong with me. So he said, well, just lay down on the table and let's have this experience. So that's exactly how that went. And it was interesting. I laid down on the table and I breathed a little bit better and I kind of thought, interesting. And not until I went back into the audience and sat down beside my brother and he said, Laurie, you are so full of shit. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, when did you get divorced? And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize. I was so disassociated from my body that I didn't even realize that was a stressor. And God knows I didn't realize that it was a stressor that I was carrying with me. And the way that I presented and the way that the tone of my body and the way that I postured had such a huge effect on the way I presented myself in the world. And the weekend went through and I thought, I don't know what just happened. I don't know what's going on here. But I do know that I need more of this care in my body because I didn't even know what I didn't know. And that's how I began.
Wow. Beautiful story. Yeah. Such a fascinating portrayal of this kind of innocence within the disassociation of just truly believing what you said on stage, but actually it just not being the truth. And
I thought that I was healthy. I mean, I'd spent my whole life being a chiropractor and being aware of holistic health. But again, I was absolutely unaware of what I didn't know.
That seems to be the theme forever now, doesn't it? We keep finding out the more you dive, the more you find you don't know. And that gets more compelling all the time. I'm still asking that question. I don't like, what do I do?
Well, thanks for sharing that story, Laurie. There's so many different directions we could go in, but let's just park that for now and come back to some of those little juicy doors that you've just created for us, and pass it to Jade, maybe to share a bit about your journey.
Yeah, you have to sort of self-reflect over and over because you don't even know where the journey begins. Because I wonder why I'm in where I'm in, and what brought me here, and then why am I so interested in this? It continues to be, I'm more and more intrigued, but it feels like I'm wanting more and more to know about what it is that I do. I'm still not sure, and yet I'm more certain than ever. But now I'm looking back. Was such an incredible conversation. I was with 4 people, and this is partly why I think I know a little bit more of what directs me. It wasn't what we were talking about, but we ended up realizing there was 4 people, each one of us had a death incident. So we died and we came back. So each person then, first of all, our jaws dropped. We all had that in common. 4 people having a conversation. The fellow, the most recent, was a person in my practice, and he had a mysterious thing that put him into a deep coma, and they had no idea what it was. They still don't. And then he spontaneously came out of it. And that was one person. One person had a hypersensitive or immune response to an allergen, so that they went into kind of like a coma state as well. One was a drug overdose. And mine, I was the earliest person. I was a neonate. I think I wasn't even 1 year old. My mom just left the bathroom for a moment. I flipped forward into the tub. She came back and I was gone, but she saved me. So I realized there was something, when we had our conversation, we all shared something. We all had some kind of soul message. Mine was, there was some kind of message always about being a steward of my body. It was like this thing that and it's driven me all the time, just stewardship of the body. One was a message of healing. So the one woman that had the drug overdose, she searches for healing, and she's been searching for healing for her entire life. One was just witnessing. Her message was just to witness. And the other fellow was just the place of just awareness. So each person had sort of like a soul message, and it became such an incredible conversation, because then we see that there's more than one message, but this is a driving message that keeps me on this weird, wonderful, and very curious place. And Network has been one of the most beautiful additions, because it answered a question, and it came to me when I was on the table once, when it was like the same kind of voice, not that I remember when I was less than 1, but that the voice was, the wave is everything. So it's not the technique even, it was the wave. So I love talking about that, because there's something magical about what's going on when our nervous system generates a waveform. So I'm hoping we can dive into that, because that to me is what I'm super curious about now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're kind of tantalizing a few different things there of what they might mean. But what comes to mind here is something I was just talking about yesterday with a client, and it was around the hero's journey and this idea of being called to adventure, and we refuse the call to start with. And there's this often in every great movie, Star Wars, The Matrix, whatever, there's always that hero that is called out and then refuses, wants to stay in the ordinary world. And then it becomes a greater call, and it kind of is there's a tap tap at the door to start with, and it increases to a knock knock, and then it goes to a bang bang, and you can't refuse it. You get divorced, or you have a loved one who dies, or you burn out, or suddenly your industry changes, and you're forced into the special world and going on this adventure into your facing your demons and uncovering the gifts and the wisdom behind all of that. And so that journey is something that repeats itself again and again in lives. And often, or what I've seen, is people seem to be a little bit stuck in that first stage. They keep just spinning their wheels and forcing life to come at them with even harder knocks until they finally break down, break through, and start to transform their lives and take a new path. But I wonder, within each of your journeys, you've seen the same things, I guess, happen in your clients as well, where they come to you and they repeat the same patterns, and then one day some event happens, or perhaps when you do some level of entrainment, suddenly that is enough of a catalyst to change their lives. I wonder if you can speak to that for a moment, about the transformation from the status quo into this journey of being willing to open Pandora's box, or being willing to say, yes, I was stressed and traumatized. I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit more.
Awesome question. Lori, that's a good
Um,
discussion right now.
and we see it. I think that we become the stewards of allowing people to become more aware of self. That's, I think, what our gift is. And Jay talked about that. Our avenue is working with that nervous system and working with that wave. But ultimately, I think that in my eyes, it's awareness of self that I want to have people experience. And what that is truly theirs. But the more we can actually allow them to be more connected through, just as I was using myself as an example, I had no idea how disassociated I was. But the more I can actually see, wow, I was full of shit. Like I really didn't know that that was what was part of what was going on. So when you have those moments, then the choice is yours. And different people do it differently. There's no correct way. But if you start to see the knock knock, then it's up to you when you choose to open that door. And we all have different reasons why we do or don't open that door. But as the knocks get louder, it becomes more and more compelling to do that because otherwise you start to live a very painful life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of what we do. We get to see people choose to open those doors at their own timing and not to have so much pain in their life. It doesn't mean the process is always easy. Sometimes the process is very difficult because there are big decisions that have to be made, but it makes a huge difference to it's the fuel that keeps us going, or certainly it's the fuel that keeps me going. It's beautiful to see and to hold that space for people to express themselves.
And within that journey of awareness and then taking action, have you seen any kind of correlation between patients of whether it's the level of pain that they can hold or whether or not it's something that happens? Hello
I
to Jojo
apologize.
there in the background.
For me, that pain story is then what the hero's journey becomes. That's all consuming then, which is really distracting for people because then that's where I'm at now, is helping to try to reframe in the entrainment the search for something more than just pain relief. That seems to be a trap. I know that's just my new observations. Pain relief is a noble adventure, but it's never really, we see that it's not very good what's going on out here for getting pain relief. We see problems with narcotics and fentanyl overdoses. So somehow people have to reframe, and it's like Rich, you said, where that hero's journey, where people are getting messages, but they're not really paying attention. And then when the message gets quite loud, it's harder for people to pay attention to their bodies. Like Laura was saying, you're going to have to find out that there's things you don't know quickly about yourself. And it's the same. When I had my very first entrainment, the first thing, that feeling like you're disconnected, but that wasn't even a conversation in my body. It was just suddenly I felt like I was absolutely useless. Everybody else has figured this out and I haven't. So that was my first entrainment, and I almost had a sense of panic. Why is everybody else getting a successful result and I got nothing? So that was huge. I wouldn't be able to notice that was huge because that's basically the operating system that I had. And that's, if we want to identify that, it's a being stuck in a perspective of not feeling like you're ever enough.
Yeah.
And that is kind of one of the most common things going. We don't feel like we're lovable. We don't feel that we give or can feel anything. We want a feeling of abundance, but it seems so far away. And I find that happens so much because in an assessment, you can see, as Lori was saying, when she was assessed, you can see a lot of things. People aren't going to want to know all that yet because they won't know that's, or they'll bypass it. They won't believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
But they start coming up to it. They'll see it. It's a relationship with your own stress. You suddenly realize it's holding you back.
Yeah, on my journey anyway, there seemed to be an essence of disassociation and numbness that you're not aware of is even there, because if you're numb, you can't feel that you're numb. And then you start to recognize that there is a numbness. And then for me anyway, I fell into this state of not enoughness and hopelessness, and then allowing myself to hold myself in the hopelessness rather than saying I need to fix it, created this doorway through this tiny little hole that started to open up new kind of, I guess, what I was dreaming of was feeling fulfilled and feeling joyful and feeling of service and of impact, and the irony of going inward into the depths of the place that you don't want to go creates this avenue into the place that you do want to go. And I wonder, kind of bringing this all back then, so with entrainments, so you're, maybe you can just explain very, very briefly or with a lot of words of what an entrainment and a network spinal experience is like, and how that starts to create this awareness in the body.
I would like
So
to
the
just share.
juice,
Yeah, go ahead, Lori. I was going to share something off the bat.
I was just going to set you up, Jay, because the juice, as you said, is in the wave. And that is what we're trying to achieve when we start the entrainments. We want to have people let go of enough defense physiology so that they can experience that wave.
And one of the most beautiful things I've read for quotes about life is constantly harvesting energy from the environment to create order. And that it's one of the, I think life is the only thing that's syntropic. It's not going down into a thermodynamic back to dust. So during life, we can organize into a hierarchy of good. To me, it's so compelling, and I think and we watch that. So the wave is your body developing its own way of creating more order. And then as it becomes more complex, we start to differentiate into more complex human being. And you get what you said, Rich, where you start to feel the same. If there's stewardship into the body, you feel more able to be of service or be more into contribution of yourself to others. So you give it to yourself, then you seem to be able to reflect it. You become the message.
So
I'm loving that. So it's constantly new learning then too. So I see the wave is now bringing insight, and it's a creative thing, and then it's giving you self-reflection. So you get both things. You're getting creativity, which is health. So we're not trying to fix something to go you back into some historic perspective, but we're bringing now organization so that you're more. And that's the part that's hard, because people put us into a more of a medical conceptual framing, which is then more, I want my pain relief. Pain relief is still, it's something we'd love to have happen, but it's messaging. So the signaling in the body is having trouble. You get that message. So you need to organize so that your message is a change, because it usually is telling you something's got to change. Wouldn't you say, Lori?
For sure. And again, just to make this a little bit more clear, because we know what we're talking about, but sometimes I think maybe the listeners are like, "What?" So when we must pay our respects to our mentor, Dr. Donald Epstein, who has created this technique and whom Jay and I have studied under for decades. And he has been an absolute master at understanding the patterns and the way that different individuals hold these tones or these patterns or this defense physiology or however you want to say it. But if you choose to come and experience this technique, what happens is you basically come into the office, you're lying on your tummy, you'll feel that a network doc or we will gently use a tonal touch. When I say that, what I mean is that I sometimes will use the metaphor of it's like tuning a guitar string. If you pluck a guitar string, you know that it vibrates at a certain frequency, and that frequency then creates that note. But if you tweak the key of that guitar string and you pluck it, it vibrates at a whole different frequency, thus creating a different note. So sometimes I feel like that's what we do. We're tweaking the keys of your strings or your nervous system in order to create a different harmonic or a different vibrational energy that gives you that awareness of where you may have held that physiology or that stuckness that we speak of as well. So a lot of our contacts are to the top of your neck and to the bottom of your spine. And that's how we enter that awareness into self. And that's also how we start to establish that wave. And that wave is, again, it looks almost like a wave. It's like each joint moves in relationship to the one above or below, where there isn't that stuckness that's impeding that as well. But in the wisdom of the wave, it's so huge. And again, we're gonna go on a big tangent with that. But in a simple form, that wave starts to release that inner messaging, that stress, that trauma, that which we weren't able to totally cope with. And with that release, for some people, it creates more pain, 1,000%, because that is part of that journey. And so for some people, it gives you the insight or the awareness to a different perception. And that's also what we're wanting to create as well. So that experience, and part of why I absolutely love this style of care is because you don't always have to know the why. It's not talk therapy. You don't have to go in and understand why that spot in your spine is always sore. You have to actually be with that soreness. You have to allow the magic of that tonal change, of that change of vibration, allowing that wave to come through, that innate energetic wisdom, coherence to come through in order to give you, and everybody does it different. There's no, oh, I remember this. And that's the beauty of it. What we think may have an influence on that has absolutely no bearing. It's your story. And so it's really interesting to watch as different people experience it differently.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for such a succinct and clear explanation of that. And I'm sure some people are still like, still, what are you saying? I think that gives you a really great idea. And so just to give a bit more of a flavor. So when you start to tune someone's body and you initiate a wave, what would you see in somebody who's got some holding patterns or some survival patterns still going on?
First of all, there probably is going to be no movement. So we do want to see a waveform generate. Anyway, that's me. I know now that the wave is the organizing principles. We're going to do things to help generate a wave. Lori described how we would make contacts and it would begin, but we'd want to see that the wave then emanates off, if you think of the spine, I don't know if my fingers can be on the screen here, but just visualize head and then bottom tailbone. You'd want to see a waveform. So everybody knows what a waveform looks like. So that waveform at the beginning and when it forms is a non-specific general wave, and it's emanating from the sacrum to the occiput. And it's exciting when a person begins to become aware of it. So the wave forming is actually you already starting to change. So then now you have a structure that's doing something that it couldn't do, one finger, structure doing something, and there's new neurology that's generating waveform, and then there's you perceiving it. So those are all parts of now sensory motor and sensory motor structure changing. So, and then it's bidirectional so that it's input to the brain and then the brain messaging and organizing this wave. So it's a communication. That's partly now what happens is you're informationally exchanging in your own body. And a frequency in a wave is, there's a lot of information. Think about any frequency off a bandwidth, a lot of information. I think of an FM radio station. There's a lot of information traveling over a frequency.
Yeah.
And so it really varies from person to person. You'll start to see that they may not organize in a perfect wave form, but their shoulders start to drop. The tension in their trap starts to let go. They take a breath. They might reorientate themselves on the table. There's these signs that you can see. Interesting. Their intelligence in their body is starting to reorganize. And again, it may not be, and that's again the beauty of the work. And Jay and I have been working at it. We've been our own self-lab. We were very consistent about getting together weekly, if not bi-weekly, where we would use our own bodies to go through this process and develop these waves and develop that. And the other beauty of network is that if I've worked with a person for a period of time and we've created some of this awareness, they may go away for a year or 2 years, but when they come back in my office after a time, you make that same initial contact and you're like, cool. Their body understands what that organization was. We don't have to start right back at that first stage. That wisdom of the body is able to pick it up. And I don't know any other technique that does that. Their symptoms and their pain may be a different story, but the smartness of their body knows how to organize to that level in which they had been organized.
That's fun. I don't know if you've ever seen anything with somatics, Rich.
As in like
where they have
sand on
the plate. So in essence, that's what the wave is. So signal, strength, maintaining order. So dissonance, or when we've all said we had levels of disconnection. So dissonance, disconnection, and in the body, when we're disconnected, we're probably inflaming. So neurofragmentation, disconnection. It's just you don't know, but you may have symptoms. So fundamentally, it's part of the symptom picture. You just don't think in terms of, oh, I'm disconnected. So that cymatics, or that harmonic where the sand is vibrating on a plate and then you get a beautiful mandala or some shape that's maintaining, but it's only maintaining that shape when the sound, the acoustic sound, is doing something. So if it's a frequency, but if they change the frequency, the shape changes. So we have that ability in our bodies. We're signaling, so light, sound, and we're operating a waveform through light and sound because that's what it is. But it's now emanating through neurology and then structure, and then we get structural reorganization. But then it really is cool because as Lori's story, go back to Lori's story, her shape and form could tell the story. So the tension pattern, the shape, the posture. Now, people don't know that we can read a lot of the biology based on the shape, the tone, and the figure of the whole system. So now as you introduce a wave, the wave starts to shake up your existing stories that you hold. Because some of them now are holding you back, as we were commenting earlier.
And in that original story there, Laurie, maybe you can paint that picture of what it was like for you. So they made contact with the top of the spine and the bottom of the spine. Did you start moving in some shape or form? Because I guess when I first did it, I wasn't aware of that being the thing. And so I had my own protective patterns saying, what's this sensation? I'm just going to hold it down because it's not safe to just let my body move in weird ways. And that's kind of the initial one. And when the nervous system really relaxes, suddenly twitches start to emerge and movements start to appear and sighs start to happen. And so I wonder how that was like for you in that first journey and how the mind plays this controlling factor on how the body is allowed to move. And then when you allow the mind to soften and allow the body to start taking more fluidity, it naturally comes more into this coherence, reorganized state that allows this kind of harmonic and, as you said, reorganization. I really love that word. So maybe, Laura, you can speak to that.
So again, through the weekend, I think when I had my first entrainment, I really can't tell you that I noticed that much. Like I said, maybe I took a deeper breath or maybe I moved a little bit on the table. And it's really interesting because we're all different people. There is no right answer to this. Some of us move a lot, some of us don't move at all. And either or is fine because we are different people. So it's not always, you don't always have to move to make it effective, but that's definitely how different people express themselves. Mm-hmm. But then to answer your question, Rich, by the end of the weekend.
Jump in there after a while,
yeah.
Lori. Let's get it intriguing now because we're going to get curious. We're researching. If a person never moves, then let's say they've come in for a lot of visits and they're still just laying there. After a while, that would be a concern for me that we're not seeing development. So the first entrainment, I was like nothing happened. And that's when I thought I was a failure, but I didn't even know what should happen. So I'm going to just add that in that, excuse me, after a while, if it was a few entrainments and there was still zero things happening, then we're going to have to call on some other intelligence to get something going.
But the degree of movement varies from individual to individual. So again, some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts. How we express ourselves varies, and all is right. But you do want some movement. But by the end of the weekend, the end of that particular seminar that I was in Toronto in this horrible smelling Toronto hotel room, I didn't really know what happened. But the way that I felt in my body, a long time ago, I used to race mountain bikes, and I wasn't really that great, but I loved the training and I loved the racing. And I love the racing because by the time I was finished my race, I was so exhausted that I actually equated that to feeling peaceful. And the feeling of actually getting across that finish line and lying on the grass and just being so exhaustedly tired, I equated to peace. And I thought, so that was part of my motivation. I wanted to absolutely burn myself out to the absolute end of exhaustion so that I actually felt quiet in my mind. And I said to my brother, I'm like, I don't know what just happened, but I feel like I've just had the greatest mountain bike race ever because I finally feel quiet. And again, how I moved, how I breathed, but my experience was, I don't know what's going on, but for the very first time in a very long time, I didn't have to beat myself up to feel calm. And that's what hooked me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for speaking to that. I can definitely relate to that. It was 10 years of feeling anxious and forgetting about what calm actually feels like. You just don't remember, and you think that a certain level of calm is calm. And that's why I see a lot of my clients, they're operating in the faux window of tolerance so that they're not actually in a calm state. They're still activated, but that level of activation is all that their nervous system will allow them to do, because anything less is scary, is uncomfortable, is not safe. And so you continually drive yourself with coffee or activation or exercise or working hard or doing whatever to keep yourself in that safe space of, I need to keep going because otherwise I'm worthless and I can't possibly be worthless. And so thank you for speaking to that, because for me, when I first did my first breath work ever, I allowed myself to cry, and the catharsis afterwards, I finally really felt what it was like to feel calm and peaceful after that. And there was such a relief, such a sense of just a huge sigh of releasing all that stress. And so it's beautiful that you experienced that in the first case, and that can create that window in your clients as well.
And we all come to it differently, but that again is that hope. Again, for many, it's not a straight path.
And we'll just add to this because we're on a good topic. The base wiring we're essentially talking about, and it's asking at a nanosecond level, am I safe? So everything we've said, so none of us on our first encounters with having an entrainment on ourselves, did we have any kind of sense of safety? So the body is just saying, the brain is registering a signal and we're asking, am I safe? Nanosecond to nanosecond. So when something becomes at ease, that's the first signal of outside of safe, like lack of safety. I felt that, but it was probably on the fourth entrainment then, but I had massive exhilaration. It felt more alive than it ever felt. That made me question a lot of things. I said, what the heck? What is this feeling? A new definition of alive. I look back at that now because you wonder, like, so more entrainments and then more rich experiences, and then it lets you ask new questions about, well, what is safety, or what is peace, what is ease? People know what anxiety feels like, but do they ever know what, like, they're very good at saying that too, like describing it. But if you ask them to say, well, what does gratitude feel like, or what does delight feel like? Nobody can answer that. So I'd like the experience of that. Because we know the other ones, we know what worry feels like, we know what anxiousness feels like, distress. But I like now to challenge the other way. Can you describe what this feels like? Like, what does gratitude feel like? I want the experience.
And then that recognition that sometimes some of those feelings are very similar, anxiety to excitement. There's a very similar nuance to how it feels. And also within this feeling state, you can drop into these new experiences which we might not have felt ever in our entire lives. And people might have told us how it feels, but without actually allowing our bodies to drop into that level of safety and trust, it's not accessible to us. And so within this journey, you talked about the start of awareness, helping someone to see what they don't know, to show them that you're feeling a certain way and there is this state of possibility that is out there, and it's not a case of rushing to get it or taking some magic pill. And then also realizing that within a lot of society, there's more this state of numbness through addictions or medication or scrolling or TV or food or whatever, rather than a true sense of peace and gratitude that is actually accessible to people. And people, I don't think, even I wasn't for sure, aware of what that actually felt like. And I think within my family, and maybe even a lot of the British people, a lot of people around the world don't actually know what it feels like to feel safe fully and at peace fully and gratitude fully, because they've always been in this state of survival. They've always been in this subconscious level of awareness that I am at threat just for being me, just for being myself right now in this room. I'm not actually safe. And so,
and what is the consequence of that? Like you said, what's the consequence of that over time? So living like that, there is something going on, because if you're not at ease, where are you, and what's going on? What's the level of tension then? And then tension, unresolved tension over time, what is the consequence of that? There is a consequence, isn't there? Like, we know the loop of tension, inflammation, and then what's the end stage of inflammation? Fibrosis.
Disease.
Yeah. That's the scary part. And when people are in disease, then they're wanting the cure or the pain relief. And yet you got there by being in that state, Rich, that you were just talking about. So it's becoming, so awareness can heal as we get awareness of, I'm in my, but it takes the level of self-reflection of, I'm disconnected. Can you become aware of that instead of rationalizing where you're at? That's different, because the brain can play tricks of the mind. I'll say the lower mental. And you were commenting at the very beginning about how the mind can suppress or amplify something. It can change the state. It can support the defensive state, and then that normalizes.
Yeah, and those survival patterns make sense in the wild, because we need to focus on the things that are a threat rather than the things that are a pleasure to keep us alive. And
that's actually not a negative thing, is it? Like, we're super designed to survive, but long-term surviving sometimes doesn't feel that great. Like, you feel you're getting by, but that's it. Your experience of life is just that. I think health is about, can we know that there's something more than just getting by?
In the world of,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry,
I was just
in
going to
the
say,
world of,
reminding of a fellow that said this to me, and well, it was just a quote, but you don't want to be on your epitaph, on your tombstone, that I got by. That's, that's not the journey. I just survived.
Yeah, I got to the end.
I got to the end.
in the world of network, we, again, it's an evolution. So it's not like each one of these things is defined. But as mentioned, our initial goal when somebody's first with us is to create that awareness. And again, we all will experiencing that differently. And as you start to create awareness, then our next kind of goal is to create enough fuel or enough energy to start to change the pattern. We want that transform kind of connection, or that ability to know that there's enough of them in there to shift what they are now aware of in their system. And as we kind of work our way through that transform, which we perhaps will talk about when Jay talks about that spark, or that I have enough transform to know that something's not right, and wherewithal to start to shift that. But as we then move through that transform energy, our goal is then to take you almost to a state of awaken, a state of gratitude, a state of love. And again, that's the process that we work with people through care as a process. And again, back to your original questions, Rich, that's part of our joy of watching people in that journey and how they make those changes and what that means for them in their lives.
So you're bringing a little bit of that towards these 5 phases, and not to kind of give you guys a quiz on testing your knowledge of these 5 phases, but I wonder if you can speak, you kind of just summarized it there. I wonder if there's any nuances with Donald Epstein's works and these 5 phases of tension that we can kind of live in.
I just think we're on a really good fluidness, right, with what Laurie was saying. And I wanted to just mention that in Transform now, we're in training and we're learning. We can become aware now of the resources and train to resources. And what are resources? What are our resources in our body? Like, I didn't even know this. So chiropractic school, and then I thought chiropractic was going to be a lot more about learning about health, which I think it is a little bit, but I think that's still the individual. And I think that's what Laurie and I, we gain a lot because we do constant research with ourselves. And the question is always, what is health? So we can study disease. Donny said that once, Donny Epstein, at one of the seminars I was at, was, you should spend the rest of your life now studying health. You've done a lot of studying of disease, but you should spend the rest of your life studying health. And that resonated beautifully. But that's a big topic. So what is health and what is love? Those are big topics. And I'm interested in that. That's where I'm finding more and more. I learn more about health.
And so bringing that to resourcing then, what would you say is kind of the epicenter of either resourcing or of health that allows it to occur?
Yeah, so first, what are our resources? Nutrition is a resource, but is it like, we can go deeper than that? Like, what does nutrition bring us? Because I find I didn't feel as healthy as I do now, and I'm still progressing, which was really fun, but like, I could see that I have benchmarks now, like what exercise did and what nutrition did, but then what the wave is doing. And then the wave, as it becomes more complex, is doing more for me. So, and has an element of self-regulation, which we could dive into as well. Excuse me. So what is the resources that we're using on the table? So the doc is making contacts and guiding. We're guides, and then we're making the guide, and the contact is like a suggestion. And on your first entrainment, Rich, you were saying felt a contact, and then what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I felt a sensation, but I resisted it. I held it. I held it back.
Could you tell you were resisting it?
I could tell I suppressed the sensation because I felt something happening, and I held my body.
See, I didn't, on my first one, I didn't know, even though I did that same thing, but I didn't even have awareness that I did that. It was only until, and I bless this doctor, I don't know who it was, but it was some person in the seminar, and she pushed one of the resources for me because I was kind of like just laying there and nothing was happening. And I knew that the wave was important because I'd already seen that. I said, those people that get waves, they seem way happier than me. That was my first reason why I go, I want to learn this stuff. They're way happier. And I think that's important for being healthy, is to have access to feeling happy more often. So movement was one of the big activators of resource. So movement, energy, breath, and then awareness. Then in transform, what we were talking about, there's a spark that emanates. It's from the emotional field. So we're actually in training to fields of intelligence as well as resources. That's why I don't see it so much the phasic distortions or dissonance, but we don't have to spend that much time on the distortion because the wave is actually creating coherence. Looking at it through the lens of problem, I do that, but I'm finding I used to love wanting to explain that to people, but I found people weren't that interested in it.
Right.
They're not that interested. They want to get rid of whatever it is that they're like. If they're in pain, they want more answers to that. So sometimes it's still frustrating because they don't see the relationship of how the wave is going to help get rid of their pain. But if they get some type of experience, then that they go, oh my God. And that's because the insight, then you start to see why you can organize and transcend the pain. You had it, I had it, Lori had it.
And I think that
yes, go ahead.
And I think that that's what Jay's talking about is it's not we're not trying to. I mean, we do use the different phases to understand how to make those contacts on a technical level, but it's not like we want to focus on what's wrong. We want to create a more compelling future. And so again, we might see those patterns, but they're just distortions. We're more keen to create coherence because that's where the juice is. That's where the love is.
Yeah, the reason why I mentioned it was because those phases, really some of that identification helped me to become aware of that which I didn't aware of, how I was incoherent or in distortion in that space. I knew that was, for example, my neck was a little bit stooped forwards. I knew that was a thing, but then correlating that to a lack of trust and not enoughness and feeling like I'm rushed helped me to then realize, this modality understands where I'm at, because now it's aligned physical sensation, physical representation with a mental kind of state of being. And that's true, that correlation. And so then to say, and if we take that a step further, to bring a waveform through it to reorganize and bring coherence, allowed me to then say, okay, well, this makes sense to me as a path to follow. Now the kind of light is shined in the darkness. I can see that's a way that would make sense.
That's neat because you had knowledge, and then you were applying knowledge, and then it resonated because you had the experience to match the knowledge.
Yeah, and that allowed my mental to kind of drop into a level of safety, because my mind could say, oh, I now feel cognitively, mentally safe, so then I can allow the body to go further, rather than saying, what the hell is this sensation? I don't know what's happening. Why is it happening? All the questions that start to emerge that kind of put up the armor of keeping me safe in my own.
You see, now that's where I get, this is what Laurie and I we'll do lots of experimenting with entrainment, because we go, wait a second, who was it that then noticed something more? And is it the map maker inside? So the storyteller that was suppressing when those contacts, you had a sensation, but suddenly what was it that allowed you now to have sensation move, and you accepted it rather than suppress it? So you're seeing it now through more than one lens. That's what I'm going, okay. So higher circuitry was also observing emotional input and thinking, because you were doing both. The fields are acting all the time, but now superconsciousness or neocortical awareness kicks in, so that you now start organizing using those informational signals. So then we're getting signal strength, more organization, and then the wave is expressing itself.
Yeah.
And we just have to look at people. Like, you watch people and you see patterns in people. And so we all do it. We all live in this world. So we all have our patterns of distortion. But again, knowing the ability to understand where your patterns are and the ability to have enough flexibility to change that is, again, part of what we wish for all of our.
And thanks for that, Laura, because in transform, you start to have oscillation and elasticity in the structure. So you actually represent structurally neuroplastic behavior. That
your posture changes. Your anterior
you can actually
head carriage shifts because you actually have enough resource there's enough elasticity in that tissue to actually start to improve that long-term chronic postural stress.
And
And
that's
think about the world that we live in today where everybody has got the anterior head carriage and we're looking at our phone and we're texting and we're doing, it is an epidemic. So we need to give people those resources. Otherwise it shortens that emotional, physical awareness that they hold their vessel in.
and I've been reframed because I was a long time ago, I understood the concept of what we were doing in Transform, but the felt sense and the repeating in my own body, I'm realizing, my God, we're promoting elastic nature within our body. So that's creative. That's different than fixing it. And there is no fixing. You couldn't take a supplement to have elastic. You can get flexibility, but elasticity is the ability to elongate and then come back to that same form. It's like the elastic band. But I don't know of a supplement that could do that, and I don't know of any kind of medication that could do that. And that's not bragging. It's, again, the use of your fields of intelligence and then applying them anatomically to then promote health changes that reflect in your structure. So you actually experience yourself as a more neuroflexible individual. So that's cortical, midbrain, emotion, all these circuitries and harmonizing. And it feels amazing.
What's coming to mind is kind of like this image of a beehive or like a sheet of beeswax, and you have these little hexagons that are all joined together in this perfect organized structure, and there's a lot of flex to it and there's a lot of movement to it, and it's malleable. And if those hexagons are out of alignment or they're positioned wrong, then the whole thing would just collapse and it wouldn't be able to have structure and solidity to it. And so that's what I'm kind of understanding in my head right now, of this being out of coherence, i.e. the mind is saying this structure should be like this one should be like this, because that's what's required to keep me safe. But the truth is our body and our natural state is at a different level of coherence. And so you're supporting through the spark and the wave, the body to come back into that natural blueprint or natural alignment.
Right, and you'll feel tensegrity, strength in elasticity, but that, like you described, that Buckminster Fuller, the geodesic dome, and how it can move and change shape so beautifully, but it maintains integrity. We can enhance that in ourselves.
And
Yeah,
so
it's a beautiful analogy.
where do you think that's actually happening then? Because it's a little bit meta, because obviously like we are made of energy, atoms and electrons, and a lot of energy flying around that somehow coherent at a certain level, that we have physical matter. And alongside that, we somehow have a nervous system and a brain and all these operating things. What is it that's actually coming into reorganization within this work?
Oh, that's a good question. That's, again, you see, we talk about it, sleep with that question, watch it come to life in the office. What is it? Fascia, muscle, like the ability of noticing that you're quantum, you're chemical, you're mechanical, you're electrical, but then
You're energetic,
and you're energetic,
you're ancestral.
you're ancestral. So you start to see that tensegrity in systems, and the idea that you can now interface between mechanical, chemical, and electrical, ancestral. So that,
And again, it changes the construct of what we've always known, because we think about a nerve impulse and we think about, the axon and the dendrite and the communication. But is that really all there is to it? Because isn't there more to that communication? Isn't there more to making that hexagon than the axon and the dendrite and the little chemical neurotransmitters that go across that synapse? And so the more I do this work, the more I'm like, there's got to be more to it than that, because I just saw this incredible energetic of an old trauma of a grandmother come into this person, and it shifted how that individual on the table held their anterior head carriage. So I know that it's not just about the neurotransmitter.
yeah, it can't be, can it? Like after a while you do, no, and some of the communication's too fast. And then you come across research. There's a fellow, Dr. Zapatera, he does a lot of research on CSF, cerebral spinal fluid. Then it makes sense what's happening with the wave, and that it involves light and acoustic. He found light receptors on the ventricles of the inside of the brain. Why would we have light receptors on the deepest place in the darkest area of the body? So obviously he's going, oh my God, we communicate with the sun, but we create light. So light communicates. We create it, but we also interface with light. We do that with water. We do that. So that's where the picture always gets bigger now, that we have a body communicating, but the body is not separate from its environment. We're made of water. We can't, and yet we do, but we can't sequester away from the sun, and we shouldn't be, because we're in relationship with these things. So you can see then electromagnetic spectrum is waveform. We harmonize the same thing. We're creating frequencies of light and sound that are communicating messages, but we're also broadcasting so that it's going out, but we're also receiving. So that's this cool harvesting of resource, create more order, biology, and then we can improve on how we do that. I like that because it writes a better story about what is health. I'm having fun with going, okay, so I repeat the wave for myself, and Lori and I get entrained a lot. I repeat that. I seem to get more ability to organize, and I sustain higher levels of organization. And knowing a little bit about disease now, de-differentiation or lack of specialization is disease. Cancer cells, they're kind of a lower form of organization.
And then to bring that full spectrum, the more we get entrained, the more intuitive we become, the more we're able to resource from higher energetic levels. We're not working off of the energetic level of just surviving or just being run by our emotions or being just run by the hamster wheel of our brain. We start to resource to, intuitive energetics, whether it's our conscious or our superconscious or however we want to language that. And again, that's the joy. That's the fun of feeling a bit broader range of emotion, a broader range of life.
And we ask each other on our entrainments to call us out on our patterns. Lori, I want Lori to say, Jay, pay attention. This is a pattern that you do. So pay attention to your tension so that you can use that tension as fuel now, because it doesn't have to hold. When we started, you and I, Rich, we both suppressed sensation immediately. Now I don't do that. I'm actually looking for tension. That's part of Lori's guiding. I want to know where tension is, and I want to know how to organize to more coherence.
Yeah, there's a
And
flow.
then what gift is with that? Because there's always a gift with that. There is a light and a dark to that. You're like, holy smokes, there it is. I've got my tailbone tucked so far up my butt that I can't even start to move. If I actually start to create a little bit of release in my pelvis, wow, my life, I can.
Yeah, allowing the flow of life to start coming through rather than resist it. And in that resistance,
Mhm.
there's the pressure. In the resistance, there's the anxiety. And when we
The
let go,
suppression, the heaviness, the chaos.
this is going to be a little bit out there, but I know that there's some trains of thoughts around at some point our DNA structure will shift into more of a crystalline shape. And I wonder if you could see this kind of work or this direction starting to change the structure of humanity. And some people are already perceived or believed to be able to feed off light alone and have enough sustenance or nutritional resource to live purely through light energy. And so I wonder if you've come across that or see that as a trajectory of where this could be going.
I look for that stuff too. It's interesting, isn't it? So now when we get here, it's each person's individual experiences and researching with it. I like to find podcasts on that too. So I've never met somebody that can just live with light. I know they can do it temporarily. So I don't know. And you have to spend a lot of time meditating. And going back to DNA, I'd love to know more what DNA is doing in a living person. So we don't, because it's in movement and it's in relationship with water. So something's happening there because it becomes an antenna. The interaction with water. Have you ever done any reading of this woman, Vita Austin? She's an interesting soul. She photographs, so she can put a picture on a little petri dish or underneath a petri dish, and the water will imprint an image. It's kind of Marasu Emoto's work, but more advanced now. Mm-hmm. And the water imprints an image. So if the picture was a picture of a person, the frozen water, when she freezes it, will have the image. It's not perfect, excuse me, but it's like a photograph. So going out there, water seems to reflect our consciousness. So it might be where consciousness lives. So this DNA part, it's like this antenna that interacts with water, and then it's messaging. So I don't know. I'd love to know more about the crystalline expression, but to me it makes sense because I know vertebral bodies in oscillation, they're like crystals too. They create their own harmony of rhythm. We can see visual figure eight expressions as we get into the superconsciousness of the neocortex dancing with the spine as well. So we see figure eight relationships developing in the spine. So DNA has to be doing something very incredible that we don't really know much about. I look for research, it's just hard to find.
Yeah, it's pretty far on the forefront of scientific research, and at least is now kind of touching into some more esoteric understandings that have been there for thousands of years.
Yeah,
but it kind of makes me think right now of how poor our society is kind of set up for this in terms of the water that we drink. You know, it's kind of stagnating in our taps or in our sources, and it's not allowed or supported to be alive in and of itself. And so we're ingesting something that is stagnant. And so I wonder if you've come across any explorations in yourself or in work around.
We talked about that in Laurie's office. We did a wave lab, and we introduced Gerald Pollack's work with water, structured water, and its relationship then in vascularity and circulation and energy. So we might have to do another podcast on that. That's big. But then it relates back to network, because the wave helps create that gel phase of that's super important, aligning arteries and vessels.
And that has a huge effect on what is health. Because again, if we can transform those phases, it makes such a huge difference. And again, it's not we doing it. It's us understanding that it's happening and how to learn how to tap into that.
Yeah, and then it goes back to that's not a disease chasing thing. It's a wellness and what is health question. And we're pursuing what is that. And there's so much development. And then we start to get the byproducts and the expressions of healthier bodies. And even if we go into dissonance, which we will, everything can come out of tune, but the ability to self-regulate is more advanced. So getting sick can be less intense, faster to recover. You're still going to, metabolism alone is quite a big journey, and we have byproducts of waste, and the things that clean you aren't working properly. We can accumulate toxic byproducts. So the cleaning elements of the body are really, really important. And that's, again, how well are we communicating through systems? Is the liver under tension? If the spine is under tension, organs can be under tension. That's what I see in our transform. We see pleural cavity stretching. People that have had pneumonia, let's say, scar tissue in the lungs. But if you can get pleural stretching, you can actually start to influence the scar tissue in lung tissue. It's good. It's a good byproduct. But that's not our intention, but it's going to happen. Wave will do that for you. You have to you're having to be called to transform, where you're pushing the levels of your own boundaries. I don't know if we're getting too out there now.
Might be
I get excited there, but I know that gets out there, and then a lot of times it's more, if it's done experientially, it has much more value instead of just a concept. You feel it in your body. But good topic.
Yeah, it's a juicy one.
It is a juicy one.
I mean, this is also kind of a little bit out there, but it makes me just kind of think about us in relationship to the rest of the natural world. And I think humans are kind of distinguish ourselves from animals, but really then, would you say that animals have this natural level of coherence, or have you ever seen any relationship with entrainments or waves in an animal as a natural occurrence?
Laurie's got some of her own.
And you can, if you've been in my office, you'll oftentimes see that I have a dog in my office, or I've had dogs, and they always will come and lay underneath the table. And it's funny. It's the way they have always grown up, so they are very aware to it. But they will find people that are more chaotic in their cellular structure, and they often lie with that person until they receive their entrainment, and then they'll go on to the next person. And it's really super interesting. And I feel like sometimes they're that bridge that help that autonomic nervous system, that parasympathetic nervous system calm. They pet the dog, they feel the purr of the cat, they pet the horse. They're really drawn into that because they understand that there's something happening there as well. And for sure, I absolutely work with my dogs and my animals, and I've always got some kind of animal around me. So I see it all the time in nature. And you see they change. The dogs change. I can wrap them, I can wind them up pretty quick because that's a bit my nature, but I can also calm them down pretty quick as well. So there
Yeah.
is that intelligence. It is not just in humans. There is that intelligence that is cross species for sure.
Yeah, it seemed, I don't know if there was research on it, but I remember reading about how often dogs or animals will get sick as a projection of the owner's own level of disease or lack of health. And somehow, there's no reason why. I guess this is kind of zooming out, but why is it that one person gets an ear infection or one person gets a cough or one person gets one disease and someone else doesn't? And then within animals, it's that same kind of thing. Sometimes in a stressful environment, some animals continuously get sick. They're continuously getting sick. And then other animals take them out of the stressful environment, allowing them to reorganize, to recalibrate. And suddenly now they're in better health.
And so often it's reflective of their environment, like their owners and their environment for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And so kind of bringing this back in to support people on their journey, what would you recommend as one first step for somebody who feels a bit stuck, feels like they want a change but don't really know what they're not aware of and don't really know what to do? What's one step that they can take to start progressing towards health?
Well, I think that the fact that they're listening to your podcast is the first level because they're looking for something if they've listened this far into the podcast. So I honor them for listening to us this far. And again, we all come to it in a different way. One of my mentors used to say, the penny drops differently for all of us. We start to understand the pull of gravity so differently from person to person. And there is no real home run for any of us. But awareness of self is the key. And how we come to that, whether it's through walking in barefoot in the grass, whether it's through breath, whether it's through, using some people to support you and pointing out where your dissonance is, it's awareness of self. You have to give yourself that pause to look at self in order to make a change.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Jay, anything to add on that?
Well, if they are interested in this work, I think having a guide is exceptionally valuable. The guide will kind of steer and help point out blockage, dissonance that you're not aware of, because sometimes you're not aware, as we were all saying, you're not aware of what's really going on. You don't know what you don't know. So you don't know that your body can even generate a wave until you develop. That wave is now new awareness. So there's things you can do on your own, and then there's co-creating self-regulation. So Lori mentioned some beautiful strategies. And then I'm finding that without this, I don't grow the same way. And I'm really interested in that. Just in the last couple of years now, I know I've changed so much. I think some of my practice members don't even.
So it does make a huge difference to have somebody help you along the way. On that note, we're going to do another event like you attended in my office in Squamish in August. We can kind of get back to you on those dates. I know Jay runs these events on a regular in Port Moody. And we were just talking about doing a weekend retreat. And that I think we're going to try and do in Harrison. Is that right, Jay?
Harrison,
October 20th.
But there's no availability on the date that we had. So it's going to be in October, but we have to change location. That's going to be a good.
So
Harrison would have been nice because there's hot pools too that we can explore water. So we'll have to look for something that still has something like that.
So if you reach out to us, we do host these intensive sessions that we can kind of experience as well. And then we're in practice. Come see us.
Yeah, great. And what's the best way for people? I'll share links in the description. Is the best way for people to go onto your websites, or how best to reach out to you, or just drop in?
Website's probably the easiest. Mine's clarityandhealing.com.
Yeah, websites work great. And I'm also working virtually online as well. So I have two businesses. I have one where you can kind of connect to me if you're not in the Sea to Sky area. It's at inwellhealth.org. And then Squamish Family Chiropractic is my other website. So I'm happy and pleased to talk about you and how this might influence your bodies as well.
It's amazing. And I can definitely attest to both of your work as being profound in bringing awareness internally and helping with that transformational journey. Two final questions that I love to ask everybody, which maybe we have enough time for both of you to share on. And the first one is, what does a rich life mean to you?
What does a rich life mean to me? Noticing that my questions keep getting better. It's questions I find, I don't even care about the answers anymore. The question becomes so compelling and I can tell it makes me feel more energy rich. I feel like your name comes up a lot. Rich, we use richness a lot in this conversation. Yeah, so that's for me. What are my questions? What am I asking myself, and what am I curious about?
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to go to love. Love is what it's all about, and feeling safe enough to give and receive. That is a rich life. And we can love a lot of things. And I hope for all your listeners they get to experience that love of many things. It's not just a sexual love. It's a love of the weather. It's a love of the day. It's a love of your neighbors. It's a love of your dog. It's love. And with that, you have a broader spectrum of emotion. And I really hope that that's what people get to experience. And that creates a rich life.
Yeah, thank you. Curiosity around if love is the driving factor behind all of the spark and all of the waves and all of this experience that we're in fundamentally. Similar kind of question, but slightly different. If you only had this one moment to share a message with the world, and that was your last chance to share something, what would that message be?
Oh, it's a beautiful. Well, I'm going to add to Lori, stay left open for vulnerable exchange. Love. So assess your own vulnerability. We suppressed. So it's learning to actually experience love. We have to get better at feeling it.
Allowing it. And I'm going to piggyback on you, Jay, and say that creates awareness. And again, that's a word that we've used throughout this podcast. But really knowing that I have the awareness of self to be able to allow that in and allow it. I mean, it's sometimes easier to give than to receive, depending on whom you are. But it's important to be able to do both.
Yeah, I'd say the receiving seems harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of closing off, shutting down, shielding, protecting that happens, that solidifies. And, to your point, Jay, of one of the number one diseases right now is heart disease. And so where does love emanate from, and if not the heart? And so then there for sure is this correlation between this resistance to it and this unwillingness to be vulnerable, to allow your heart to be hurt, means that we can't touch into this depth of a rich life experience.
Well said.
Thank you for doing this, Rich.
It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, thank you. I will say thank you to the listeners. Appreciate you listening, and good luck on your journeys to reconnect with yourselves. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you found some nuggets of wisdom that you can take away and start implementing in your own life. If you did, then it would mean a lot to me if you gave the show 5 stars and subscribed. That way you can come back for more next week and help spread the word. And if you really loved it and you want to find out more about how to work with me and how I can help you, then check out the links below or head over to my website, www.richadriansmith.com. And if this is bye for now, then I wish you a rich life.